World Rally Championship is the ultimate sporting test. High speeds, wild and rugged terrain, extremes of weather, and all in a car not a million miles away from the one you drive. Okay, there are a few differences. We're talking about £300,000 worth of turbocharged power, capable of hitting speeds of over 200 kilometers an hour on snow, gravel and mountainside roads. That's what the cars look like, but what of the men behind the wheel? Sebastian Loeb of the Kronos Citroën team, the reigning World Drivers' Champion, he's the man to beat. Petter Solberg, the effervescent Norwegian, is a true superstar. He took his Subaru to the World Championship in 2003, but recently he's been second best to Loeb. 2006 is Marcus Grönholm's first season with the Ford team. He's the hero of the rally-mad nation of Finland. His style is flat-out attack. Also look out for the new British hope Matthew Wilson. Still a teenager, but he heads the challenge of the Stobart Ford team. Austria's Manfred Stoll and Norway's Henning Solberg spearhead the OMV Peugeot team. A couple of tough customers who know their way round the WRC. Another Austrian, Andreas Eigner, heads the Red Bull Skoda team. He'll be supported by Gilles Panizzi. Also look out for the likes of Tony Gardemeister, Gigi Gali and Francois Duval, who'll be making a challenge on some of the events in privately entered cars. These may be the toughest and most talented men in motorsport, but they can't do it on their own.
Left of a crest, is it down short, one right, opens long, he makes a crest, it's a really short right left, opens left too long.
The pace notes delivered by the co-driver provide the driver with a detailed description of the road ahead, describing the shape of corners, the speed they should be taken at, and if there are any hidden dangers. This is a unique relationship. If it works, the man at the wheel can maintain the maximum speeds for these alien environments. If it goes wrong, it really goes wrong. The WRC is made up of 16 rounds spread across 5 continents, so look forward to the snow of Sweden, the mountain-top stages in Argentina, the fast forest roads of Finland and the outback of Australia.
For the second season running as reigning world champion, Sebastian Loeb was the first man over the start ramp at the ceremonial start in Monte Carlo's Casino Square. And the following morning, in the mountains, he and co-driver Daniel Elena were the first away from the start line. Despite the changes in team setup, it seemed business as usual for the French crew. They were more than 25 seconds faster than anyone else on this opening stage. These were classic Monte Carlo conditions, dry tarmac changing to ice and snow as the cars climbed higher into the mountains. Most crews had selected a partly studded winter tyre. Even so, Marcus Grönholm was given an early reminder of the sudden changes in grip. One man not on winter tyres was Petter Solberg. He'd gone for a racing slick and lost a massive 2 minutes to Loeb on the first stage. And worse was to come for the Norwegian. Retirement on the road section at the end of the day. Monte Carlo has never been kind to Petter. Loeb had built on his early dominance, taking a lead of well over a minute into the final stage of the day, and already looked on his way to a record-equalling 4th successive Monte Carlo victory. But nobody expected that. The man who had barely made a wrong move in 2 seasons as world champion was stuck 20 metres down a ravine.
To make a mistake in this condition, I don't like it, but this Monte Carlo this year is really tricky and it's really difficult to stay on the road.
But the car was repairable and he would return the next day under the restart rules. That left Marcus Gronholm as leader, followed by the unlikely name of Subaru's Chris Atkinson on his Monte Carlo debut. He was promoted to second, and Tony Gardemeister in an Astra Racing Peugeot 307 was third. Marcus Gronholm has never won a tarmac event, but as day 2 progressed, it looked like only an incident like that Loeb had suffered could stop him from achieving this, as he built up a lead of more than 2 minutes on day 2. On the move up the leaderboard, Manfred Stoll of OMV Peugeot. The Austrian moved up to second and into a fight for the podium positions with Tony Gardemeister. Gardemeister finished second here last year, and although no longer in a manufacturer team, was intent on repeating this. And it was the Finn who would be on top in this battle at the end of the second day, but by just a minuscule 0.2 of a second. Performance of the day though, Sebastian Loeb. He won all 5 stages on day 2 and climbed back to 4th. So as day 3 dawned, with Gronholm out of sight, Loeb's mission was to make up the 36 seconds that separated him from second place. But resistance was dogged. Stoll hung on for 3 stages, eventually being overhauled on stage 15. The Austrian would finish 4th, a strong start to his first full season in a WRC car. Gardemeister hung on until the final stage, but as Loeb made the final pass over the Turini, the splits were telling him that he'd made up the time and more. It was looking like his salvage job was complete. Gronholm set out on the final day knowing that only error or fate could stop him from winning his first Monte Carlo. And memories of last year when he threw away his chance of finishing second when caught out by a patch of snow on the descent from the Col de Turini may have been at the back of his mind. But his only scare was some smoke from one of his wheels following a minor collision on the last stage. Finally, he and co-driver Timo Rautiainen could add this most famous of events to their list of wins, and on their Ford debut as well. Further down the leaderboard, Subaru's Stefan Sarrazin finished 5th. His teammate Chris Atkinson hung on to take 6th.
Marcus, congratulations, a new team, a new car and a very first victory here in Monte Carlo. You must be very pleased.
Yeah, that's very nice. I mean, to win first time with a team and a car, so it's the best.
With a healthy covering of snow and temperatures as low as -15, conditions were perfect for the Swedish rally. But the Petter Solberg fans would be disappointed. This landing on the very first stage broke his rear drive shaft, and he would lose nearly 2 minutes to the front runners before he reached service.
How is it possible? You know, all the time?
So the battle at the top became a head-to-head between Marcus Gronholm and Sebastian Loeb. The most likely challenger to the leading duo was Ford's Mikko Hirvonen. He was in crowd-pleasing form over Collins Crest, but on the same stage, the drive belt in his water pump broke. With his engine overheating, the team told him to stop. With Hirvonen retired, the battle for 3rd place became one between 2 Mitsubishis, Gigi Galis and the Lancer of the host nations, Daniel Carlson. And this would be a thriller. For much of the last 2 days, the gap between them would be measured in tenths of seconds. At the top, things were starting to look more certain. Over the first 2 days, Marcus Grönholm chalked up 7 stage wins to open up a lead of 25 seconds over Loeb. The Finnish driver has won this event 3 times since 2000, and he looked to be confirming he's the master on the snow and ice. This was Henning Solberg's 10th start in the Swedish rally, and he'd fancied his chances of a podium finish. We're with him here on stage 11. Off the racing line and straight through the snowbank. Co-driver Kato Menkerud was buried under snow that had come into the car. And here's another look at that incident. They were soon on the road again, but Solberg could see little through the shattered windscreen, and Kato's boot sorted out that problem. But then they received a reminder of what the windscreen is for. The Peugeot pairing recovered to finish 8th. Henning Solberg's teammate Manfred Stoll was also looking to finish in the points here and had been as high as 4th on day 1. Here he approaches the same corner where Solberg went off. Stoll and co-driver Ilka Miner would not be able to restart. Back to the battle for 3rd. Daniel Carlsen entered the final day with a lead over Gali of just 0.3 of a second. He extended that by half a second on the day's first stage. But Gali was not letting go, and they would swap positions on each of the following 4 stages. Carlsen would take a lead of just 0.2 of a second into the final stage. After 3 days of these 2 drivers going toe-to-toe, something had to give. And what did give was Gigi Gali's gearbox. He lost 3rd gear, and that may have been the deciding factor. Carlsen was 3rd, his best result in the WRC.
It's unscribable, it's fantastic. I've never been so nervous from the finish until that point here in my whole life, I think. I'm very, very relieved. I can hardly believe it.
Marcus Grönholm had a scare on stage 16. He had to switch to manual gear shift because of a hydraulic leak. This saw his lead over Loeb reduced to less than 15 seconds, but with the service stop next, his car was returned to full working order. Grönholm went on to take the win, and this would be a triple celebration, as it was Marcus's 38th birthday, and also the 50th win for Ford in the WRC's history. Co-driver Tilma Rautiainen sent his greetings.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Grönholm's eventual winning margin just over 30 seconds. And 2 wins from 2 starts saw Grönholm leading the Drivers' Championship with 20 points. Loeb is 2nd on 16. And Grönholm's Ford team were also the pace setters in the Manufacturers' Championship. The Big Finn had definitely earned his birthday cake.
No champagne, no.
Rally Mexico got underway with the traditional display of colour at the opening ceremony in Guanajuato. But Petter Solberg wasn't in the party mood. He arrived here under close scrutiny. He'd failed to finish the previous 2 rounds of the championship. Question marks were being raised about the Subaru's reliability. And in the week preceding this rally, longtime team principal David Lapworth had been moved to another post within ProDrive, the company that runs Subaru's WRC operation. But if the Norwegian was unsettled, he didn't show it. He was fastest on the first 4 stages of the day. Lining up in the positions behind him were Mikko Hirvonen and the top 2 in the championship, Marcus Grönholm and Sebastian Loeb, who, as the first 2 on the stages, was suffering through having to do the road sweeping duties. Grönholm in 3rd was seeking to make it 3 wins from 3 starts this season, and with the benefit of a clean line on the afternoon's repeated stages, he was aiming to make this a reality.
8 ja vasemmalle
But perhaps he was
katsoi,
attacking too
pitkä
hard.
hidas betoni sisällä.
He brakes too late here. And his focus was in a ditch with a broken drive shaft. He would return under the restart rules, but with no chance of the win. The lumps, bumps and compressions of the Mexican stages make judgment of pace and braking even more crucial. Chris Atkinson, another caught out here. After disappointment in Sweden, when he retired when challenging, Mikko Hirvonen was maybe thinking of a first WRC victory when he started day 2. But on the day's opening test, he was another victim of those up and down stages. Too fast over this small crest, and with all 4 wheels off the ground, his brakes were redundant. The collision with the bank on the left sending him down the drop on the right. After the highs of Monte Carlo and Sweden, it was back down to earth with a bump for Ford boss Malcolm Wilson. The loss of his team's 2 drivers was compounded when his son Matthew, of the Stobart VK Ford team, also went off the road on stage 8.
And left, 2 plus in. Start up.
Petter Solberg had maintained his lead throughout the first day, but hadn't been happy with the ability of his Pirelli tyres to deal with the mixture of the Mexican heat and its rough roads. Sebastian Loeb's harder compound BF Goodrich tyres seemed able to handle these conditions much better, and the Frenchman's greater grip saw him take the lead from Solberg on stage 8. The following stages were slower and thus more forgiving of the Subaru's setup, and Solberg showed that he could match Loeb for speed by taking back the lead, but by only a matter of a few seconds. And Loeb retook the lead on stage 12, but stage 13 would be decisive.
Shot 6 left.
That impact broke Solberg's power steering. He would lose nearly 25 seconds by the end of the stage.
Keep left into shot 6 right.
Behind Loeb and Solberg, Manfred Stoll was giving another strong performance on his way to 3rd. And 2005 JWRC champion Daniel Sordo was in a position to record his best ever WRC finish as he had moved up to 4th. With just 3 stages on the final day, and one of them the short super special, it looked like there wouldn't be enough kilometres for Solberg to fight back. But his chances of winning would completely disappear on stage 15 when he lost his brakes towards the end of the stage. Second position was the kind of result Solberg needed, but there was still plenty for his technical team to think about before the next round in Spain. But Sebastian Loeb was back in the position we got so used to seeing him in last season, the position of being number 1 on the podium. And in the process, he became the most successful French driver in WRC history, overtaking Didier Auriol's 20 wins.
It was important to stop a bit the victory of Marcus, and also it's the first victory for Kronos, and that's really a good moment, and I took again the lead of the championship, so that's good.
Confirmation of Loeb's first victory of the season there. Further down, both Chris Atkinson and Marcus Gronholm fought their way back into the points despite having to restart. And that win put Loeb into the lead in the Drivers' Championship. Gronholm dropped to 2nd, Manfred Stoll moved up to 3rd. This was also the first win for the Kronos Citroën team, and that meant they moved ahead of Ford in the Manufacturers' Championship.
Sebastian Loeb and Citroën have a formidable record on tarmac. But Marcus Gronholm had suggested before the event that the Ford Focus 06 could beat the Citroën in Spain. And it appeared his confidence wasn't misplaced as he beat Loeb into second place on the first 3 stages.
Good car, really good. Nice to drive. I hope I can keep the same feeling during the rally now. Good.
Mikko Hirvonen was providing further proof of the speed of the Focus as he was fighting it out for a top 3 position. But on stage 5, a freak incident ruined the chances of both the Ford drivers. Within a kilometre of each other, a problem with the wastegate, which controls the pressure within the turbocharger, drained the cars of power. Over this and the following stage, Gronholm lost around 3 minutes, while Hirvonen lost well over 4. So Sebastian Loeb was now the leader, and he was at the head of a Citroën 1-2-3. And the 2 Citroëns behind were both driven by Spaniards. Second was 2005 JWRC champion Daniel Sordo. And in third position was Catalonia's #1 driver Chevy Ponce. Ponce was 4th in Spain last year and was now well placed to top that. But on day 2 he fell foul of one of the hazards of this rally. He skidded on a patch of loose gravel dragged into the road by previous runners on stage 10. There would be no fairy tale podium finish for Ponce. While the 2 leading Citroëns were still dominating, Marcus Gronholm was making sure that he would still deliver as many points as possible here. He charged through the field on day 2, making up 6 places. At the start of the final day, the only man who stood between Gronholm and a podium place was Alex Bengay in the Peugeot 307. The Frenchman held out for one more stage until Gronholm went past, but he and co-driver Caroline Escudero would still be celebrating their best ever WRC result. And Daniel Sordo would also be celebrating his best ever result, and on his home rally as well. Were we witnessing a WRC champion of the future? But from a champion of the future to the champions of the present. After uncertain beginnings this year, Loeb and Daniel Elena registered their second successive win of the season. But for once, the Frenchman would have to share the spotlight with the hero of the home nation, Daniel Sordo. Jan Kopecky also recorded his best ever position. He was 5th. In 7th and 8th positions were the Subarus of Peter Solberg and Stefan Sarazan. Both would have hoped to be challenging for top 3 positions, but neither managed to get enough speed out of the Subaru Pirelli package. The third Subaru driver, Chris Atkinson, also struggled. He was not helped by this off on stage 11.
40, late cut, 6 left plus, opens long.
Peter Solberg down to 5th in the Drivers' Championship. He's falling behind the leading duo of Loeb and Gronholm.
Marcus Gronholm had shown in Spain that he could match Sebastian Loeb's speed on tarmac. But could he beat him in Corsica, the event where Loeb had collected a clean sweep of stage wins in 2005? Loeb won the first stage on day 1, but Gronholm was second. And the Ford driver reversed the order in the second stage and closed to within 5 seconds of Loeb. But Gronholm was never 100% happy with his setup.
The car is very nervous. It's going like this all the time, like whoop, whoop, whoop. I don't know. I have to go to check now what's wrong.
And from here on in, it was one-way traffic. Loeb won the next 2 stages and the first of day 2 to open up a lead of nearly 30 seconds. With Loeb taking command at the front, attention switched to the battle for third between Dani Sordo, Mikko Hirvonen in the Ford Focus, and France's Alex Bengay. Bengay was the man in possession of third spot at the end of the first day. He was looking to top his fourth place finish in Spain. But on day two, the strength of Hirvonen's manufacturer Ford Focus and Sordo's Citroën Zara began to eclipse the Frenchman. Sordo's performance was notable in that he had to fight his way back from 13th place after stage one, where he had a problem with his differentials. Corsica's rugged coastline and picturesque villages are the backdrop to some of the WRC's toughest tarmac stages. Racing on a narrow strip of tarmac at high speeds, there's no room for error. Jari-Matti Latvala paid the price for a misjudgment here. François Duval went off on this corner on day two and was forced to retire. Skoda's Andreas Aigner found that most of the roadside obstacles in Corsica don't move if you hit them. While Petter Solberg was again struggling, losing time as early as stage one.
The 6-5 bus, the big cut, slippy, 2 left.
This spin resulting in a flattened exhaust. There would be no points for the Norwegian in Corsica. For once, Mikko Hirvonen was having a trouble-free run. His main problem being the attentions of Dani Sordo as he fought to hold on to third place. Stage after stage, the Spaniard looked to have got the better of Hirvonen in the early splits, but each time the Finn responded in the second half of the stage to hold on. But on stage 8, the last of day two, Sordo finally got his man and set his sights on his second consecutive podium finish. On the first stage of day 3, Hirvonen demonstrated that he was going to attack, reducing the gap to just 0.4 of a second. But he couldn't match Sordo on the twistier technical stage 10, and by the time the two duelists reached the final stage, number 12, the gap was back up to 5.2 seconds. This was a repeat of stage 10, where Hirvonen had lost time, but he wasn't holding back. His hard work nearly all left in tatters. This replay shows he just completely understeered there. Sordo was unaware, but Hirvonen had been shaken by that moment and had backed off, handing third place to the Spaniard. Up front, it had been another faultless drive from Loeb. This was his 23rd WRC win. He was now level with the legendary Juha Kankkunen.
To win in front of all my French fans is really a good moment.
Marcus Grönholm took second, but he still has some way to go to match Loeb on the black stuff. Loeb now on 46 points in the Drivers' Championship. Grönholm is 11 points behind. Dani Sordo establishes himself in third. After round 5, Kronos Citroën have a 3-point lead over Ford in the Manufacturers' Championship.
Argentina is known for its varied stages and conditions, and the 2006 event had nearly all the elements. There was, of course, plenty of water, some fire, and if not ice, there was some dense fog in the mountains of the Córdoba region. If the conditions were unpredictable, the outcome of this rally seemed to follow a familiar pattern. Petter Solberg needed to put his poor results on the tarmac behind him. Back on his preferred gravel surface, he had to get his championship challenge back on track. And he was quickest out of the blocks, fastest on the first stage of day one, and leader after stage 4. And luck seemed to be with him as he survived this altercation with a gate post. But as with the rest of the season, luck wasn't with him. His Subaru picked up a puncture on stage 5. The anti-deflation mousse failed to activate, and by the end of the stage, he was running on the rim. This was followed by the familiar sight of Solberg and Phil Mills having to make roadside repairs, and with a broken gearshift paddle and issues with his steering, this scene was repeated on all 3 days. Solberg's day 1 problems saw Marcus Grönholm take over at the top of the leaderboard. The Ford Focus man was now in a great position to repeat his win here in 2003. But his hopes were soon in ruins when his differential locked on stage 8. He couldn't go backwards or forwards. Retirement was the only option. And in a near-mirror image of Rally Catalunya, Grönholm was quickly followed onto the casualty list by his teammate Mikko Hirvonen. The Finn had been in 3rd when he dropped a cylinder on stage 8. Now down to 2 cylinders, he retired on the road section that followed. As in so many previous events, when his main competitors experience problems, Sebastian Loeb swoops to take maximum advantage. Now the leader, Loeb did what he'd done in Mexico, Spain and Corsica, spending the second day building a lead that would be easy to defend on the final day. Petter Solberg's speed had kept him in contention, but he couldn't get close enough to Loeb to pressurise. Also, like previous events, with Loeb looking to have the top spot wrapped up, attention was focused on the battle for the minor positions. It had looked like Gigi Gali wouldn't have a drive in the championship this year following the withdrawal of Mitsubishi, but he returned in a Peugeot 307 backed by Pirelli. And he was making the most of his reprieve as he ended day 1 in 3rd, and as ever, he was giving it everything. Another Peugeot, that of Manfred Stoll, was in 4th, just 4.1 seconds down on Gali after the first stages of day 2. But the Austrian, who was contesting his 100th WRC event, seemed to struggle more than most in the mud and fog of the second morning. He lost his 4th place to his OMV Peugeot teammate Henning Solberg. The Norwegian was progressing up the leaderboard, despite nearly coming off second best after this stage 14 impact with a rock. Numbers of spectators, and 2006 set new records, with the Cordoba police estimating that 1.7 million fans had made it onto the stages. The water splash at Santa Rosa de Calamachita was one of the hot tickets. Manfred Stoll started the final day 43 seconds behind Henning Solberg, but this was Stoll's 8th start in Argentina, while Solberg was debuting here. Experience is essential to find your rhythm around the rocky landscapes of the Mina Clavero and El Condor stages, and Stoll beat Solberg by over a minute over these 2 stages. Henning's bad day was completed when his clutch failed at the Super Specials, which ended the rally. He dropped to 7th. The Super Special was for the first time held in the Cordoba football stadium, and after 3 days of rallying there were still issues to be decided when the crews reached the start line. Danny Sordo had a lead of just 1.1 seconds over Chris Atkinson as he entered the stadium. But Chris could only watch as Sordo did enough to take 5th place. And the race for 8th between local hero Luis Perez Companc and Matthew Wilson was also decided here. The Britain prevailing and claiming his first ever point in the Drivers' Championship when the Argentinian stalled at the start of his first run. No such dramas for Gigi Gali, who grabbed his first ever podium finish. The hard-fought seconds he'd won on day 2 were enough to hold off the charging Manfred Stoll. But this was little more than a lap of honour for Sebastian Loeb, who wrapped up his 24th career win. Daniel Elena has been at his side for all of these, which meant he drew level with Luis Moya as the most successful co-driver of all time. Loeb finished 44.6 seconds ahead of Solberg, who'd made it to the end to claim second place. That moves Solberg up to 4th in the Drivers' Championship. Loeb's lead over Gronholm now 21 points.
Argentina was tough, and history suggested that the Rally d'Italia could be tougher. The stages on the island of Sardinia have developed a reputation as car breakers. But Marcus Gronholm made light of the conditions. He won all 3 stages on the first morning to open up a lead of 40 seconds. And it was good news all round for Ford, as Mikko Hirvonen was second. Sebastian Loeb was, for once, on the back foot. First on the road again, he was slowed by the very slippery, fine gravel that covered the stages. He was struggling for grip, while those behind him were taking advantage of the clean line he left behind. But even on the afternoon's repeated stages, Gronholm was the equal of Loeb, and by the end of the day he still had a lead of more than 35 seconds over the reigning world champion, who was now second. The Big Finn was in charge and brimming with confidence.
Are you worried about Sebastian pushing hard?
He's pushing, yes, and I try to do the same.
Looks like...
I'm not worried, no.
Sure?
Sure.
Petter Solberg was seeking to build on his second-place finish in Argentina. But this spin on the opening stage cost him around 20 seconds as he struggled to get the car straight again on this narrow piece of stage. And again, Solberg's Pirelli tyres were struggling on the rough gravel. On stage 5, Solberg picked up 2 punctures, and he picked up a third on stage 6. The decision was taken to retire to avoid any serious damage so he could restart the next day with a 5-minute penalty. The pictures told their own story. Solberg was almost speechless.
What's your response to this? What can the team do and what can Pirelli do to get on the pace?
Talk to the guys in charge in the team. They have a better answer.
Solberg aside, Sardinia had so far been fairly kind to the cars, but on day 2 it started to bare its teeth. Henning Solberg had been creeping up the leaderboard until he was stopped in his tracks by a roadside tree. Mikko Hirvonen was lucky to hold on to 3rd position when he got out of shape on the same section of stage. While Chris Atkinson got his line wrong over the big jump on the Monte Lerno stage. Even Sebastian Loeb wasn't immune to the perils of Sardinia. He hit a big rock embedded in stage 8. But a damaged sump guard was his only penalty. This is rally leader Marcus Gronholm approaching the same point in the stage.
Ja vasemmalle 2, oikee tosi hidas. Vasemmalle 2, oikee tosi hidas. Oho!
But crucially, the team had fitted a lighter sump guard for day 2. This was a costly decision. A damaged pipe caused a sudden loss of oil pressure. The Ford Focus was going no further.
There was a stone and big bang, but I followed the other's line, but I have no luck for the moment, so it's incredible.
Loeb yet again found himself leading, and his advantage over Mikko Hirvonen was well over a minute. Danny Sordo and Italy's Gigi Gali had been involved in their own private battle throughout the second day, and this was now over third position. They swapped position 4 times in the 6 stages, with Sordo eventually prevailing on the day's final stage. But on the road section back to service, Sardinia claimed another victim. Gali's Peugeot was overheating. The Italian was inconsolable. The final day was made up of 6 stages with no service, but all crews made it to the final stage unscathed. Peter Solberg had a chance of salvaging something with a 6th place finish, but a broken steering rack saw him drop out of the points. Another Subaru nightmare weekend was compounded when Chris Atkinson, who was in 5th position, went off the road. Mikko Hirvonen has experienced lots of bad luck in his Ford Focus this season, but not in Italy. He went some way to making up for Gronholm's retirement with his best ever WRC finish. But this was the 5th successive win of the season for Loeb and the 25th of his career, which meant that Daniel Elena was now the most successful co-driver of all time.
In first, I'm sorry, very, very sorry for Luis, but now I'm just me in front with a 25 victory. And I'm very happy and want to deduct my record at my family, my daughter and my friend Biff can see. Voilà.
Elena paying tribute there to one of the members of the co-drivers union who's no longer with us, Michael Park. Danny Sordo went on to take 3rd, while Chevy Pons achieved his best result of the season in 4th. Loeb's lead over Marcus Gronholm in the Drivers' Championship now 31 points. Sordo in 3rd, closing in on the 5th.
The Acropolis Rally may get its name from the monolith at the centre of ancient Greek civilization, but the 2006 event had a new and modern feel to it. The rally had moved to the Attica region around Athens with 16 new stages, and these stages were bookended with 2 super specials in Athens' state-of-the-art Olympic Stadium. And Sebastian Loeb was fastest in the opening super special. But once the cars got out into the country, Marcus Gronholm took control. What wasn't new was that these stages were tougher than ever. Lots of big, loose rocks, and once the surface gravel had been cleared, it exposed some very hard bedrock. But this wasn't bothering Gronholm. With a beefed-up sump guard following the incident that had ruined his chances in Sardinia, he won all 3 stages on the first morning. The rough and tough stage surfaces was of more concern for Peter Solberg. His Pirelli rubber had suffered in the 2 previous gravel rallies. But Pirelli had upgraded their tyres, and Peter Solberg seemed in good shape as he tracked Gronholm in 2nd place. BF Goodrich had also been putting in some work. They'd arrived in Greece with a new tyre, the H2, a hard compound model designed to deal with these abrasive surfaces. Marcus Gronholm put these to good use to complete a clean sweep of the day 1 stages, and the Acropolis was shaping up nicely for Ford as Mikko Hirvonen had established himself in 4th place. But what of Sebastian Loeb? A win here would be his 6th successive win of the season and the 26th of his career. A mark that would put him level at the top of the all-time standings with Carlos Sainz. But he was well and truly on the back foot in Greece. He couldn't get near Gronholm and was bettered by Petter Solberg on 5 of the 6 stages.
I think I never took so many risks in my life, but it's impossible.
Why so many risks?
Because I try extremely hard and I cannot do anything.
Considering the conditions, day 1 had been kind to the cars, but on day 2 the Acropolis began to bite. Jussi Välimäki in a privately entered Mitsubishi reduced his chances of a 2nd consecutive points finish with this off on stage 8. Francois Duval was in 5th at the start of the day. He got away with this on stage 9. But 3 stages later, a damaged wheel forced him out. Kosti Katiamäki in the Stobart VK Ford managed to escape from this rocky departure from stage 10. And Petter Solberg's rally also started to unravel. He had stalled at a hairpin on stage 9 and on stage 10 lost his brakes. On stage 12 he pulled his gear shift paddle off. This had also happened in Argentina. But worse was to follow on the road section to the final stage of the day. He damaged his suspension on a roadside rock when he swerved to avoid another vehicle. Solberg's 2006 list of problems had reached a new low.
Incredible. I just can't believe it.
And the final drama of the day would also take place on the public roads around Athens. Sebastian Loeb had punctured in the final stage of the day. With his spare already used, he was forced to drag his Citroën Zara back to service. The wheel was falling apart, and the rest of the car was following it. But the car just about lasted out for Loeb to make it back to service in time. And in the 45 minutes available, his team rebuilt the car. He incurred no time penalties, and following Solberg's problems, was now in 2nd place. Day 3 got off to a lively start, with both Red Bull Skodas finding trouble. Andreas Aigner ended up on his side, while Harry Rovanperä overshot this junction on the 1st stage. With Loeb over 2 minutes down on Gronholm, he was not going to risk anything. 8 points for 2nd would keep his Driver Championship challenge going along very nicely. So the only issue to be decided in the Olympic Stadium was the battle for 5th between Henning Solberg and Danny Sordo, who were separated by less than 4 seconds. Solberg handicapped himself when he had a problem with his launch control at the start. Sordo thought he had got it, but co-driver Mark Marty then revealed the truth. There was late drama for Mikko Hirvonen. He arrived at the stadium with only 2nd gear, but made it across the line to the relief of 4th team boss Malcolm Wilson. And relief was quickly followed by celebration, as Marcus Gronholm had finally been able to combine his speed on gravel with car reliability and get the better of Sebastian Loeb.
Acropolis rally's always been great for Ford, and you've just continued that on.
Yeah, it's my first time with a Ford here and my first win here, so good day.
Is it a relief now to get that win after the problems that you've had when leading after day 1 on so many times?
Yeah, of course it is, and only shame is that Sebastian is too far in the championship points, but what can we do?
Outside the top 3, Tony Gardemeister came home in 4th in what was only his 2nd outing of the season, while Petter Solberg returned under the restart rules to take 7th. Marcus Gronholm inched closer to Loeb in the Drivers' Championship, but at the midway point in the season, his lead is still a commanding 29 points. Dani Sordo occupies third place. Kronos Citroën still lead in the Manufacturers' Championship, but those two podium finishes mean Ford reduced the gap to 15 points.
Rally Deutschland has a well-earned reputation for being no ordinary tarmac rally, and Petter Solberg found trouble as early as shakedown. His car would need a major overnight rebuild to get him to the start, but despite some early speed, the Norwegian was never happy with the new setup, and a blown engine would force him to retire on day 2. But Sebastian Loeb and Dani Sordo were more than happy with the setup of their Citroën Zaras. They dominated day 1, Loeb winning 5 stages and Sordo winning the remaining 3. The speed of the two Citroën men is in no doubt, but they also outdid their rivals tactically, getting their tyre choices correct in the mixture of wet and dry stages. If Citroën had set their stall out, from early on Ford suggested they may be in for a difficult weekend. This is Marcus Gronholm on stage 1. And this collision was quickly followed by this impact with the Armco. Now here's Mikko Hirvonen following Gronholm through the stage. He hit that same Armco and followed that by misjudging this handbrake turn. Jari-Matti Latvala in the Stobart VK Ford Focus would also want to forget stage 1. He would have to retire, and elsewhere emotions were also running high. Chevy Pon's co-driver, Carlos Del Barrio, makes a mistake in the pace notes on stage 4. Pons obviously not happy, and soon after he had more to complain about.
Thank you.
He may have collected enough vines to make a crate of wine, but that would be no consolation to the Spaniard. Day 2 around the Panzerplatte stages is normally where all the incidents are in Germany, but with the roads dry, they were uncharacteristically kind to the cars. But wet or dry, the Citroëns were still dominating. Loeb and Sordo consolidated their top 2 places, while Tony Gardemeister in the privately entered Zara had moved up to 3rd. This was only the 3rd outing of the season for the Finn, but he was looking to show that he still has what it takes by repeating his 3rd place finish in Monte Carlo. But Marcus Gronholm was looking to spoil Gardemeister's party, and by the end of the day he held 3rd, but was having to fight all the way. With Hirvonen moving up to 5th, this was a much better day in the field for Ford. And it was turning out to be one of Skoda's better days as well. Privateer Jan Kopecky took 2 stage wins in the Fabia. While Andreas Eigner was having his best drive in the WRC so far, he would eventually finish 6th.
Jump 145.
But this rally was all about Citroën. Dani Sordo had shown again that on the tarmac at least, he is the heir apparent to his senior teammate Loeb. But in 2006, Loeb is still the master. This was his 5th straight Rally Deutschland win, equaling the feat achieved by Tommi Mäkinen in Rally Finland. And more importantly, it was also the 26th win of his career, equaling the all-time record of Carlos Sainz.
This record, for me, it's the most important in the World Championship. So to equal Carlos in this record is a very good moment, especially here in Germany with so many fans, and to win my 5th victory here is a great moment.
No Mikko Hirvonen on the final leaderboard. His good work over the last 2 days coming to nothing when a battery problem forced his retirement on the road section after the final stage. In the Drivers' Championship, Loeb's lead is now 33 points, while Tony Gardemeister's 3rd points finish in 3 starts puts him 7th. With Dani Sordo for the first time being nominated for manufacturer points, Kronos Citroën extend their lead in the Manufacturers' Championship to 23 points.
This is Rally Finland, the high-speed, bit-jumping bonanza. Five-time winner and local hero Marcus Gronholm was the hot favourite. And Sebastian Loeb was looking for that record-beating 27th WRC win, and this is one of the few events he hasn't won. He badly wants this one on his CV. But the Scandinavians were showing him the way. Marcus Gronholm, as expected, took an early lead. Mikko Hirvonen lives among these stages and used his local knowledge to put himself in 2nd. While Petter Solberg was in 3rd. But on stage 5, the Loeb fight back started. He moved up to 2nd and was putting some pressure on Gronholm. And the Ford man was not entirely happy in the greasy day 1 conditions.
It was so sleepy, I mean. Hui, incredible.
Sweden's Daniel Carlson in the Mitsubishi, and it's slippier than most. The sun was out for the 2nd leg for what is always one of the most spectacular days rallying of the year, the centrepiece being the Onimpoja stages. Mikko Hirvonen put in an early candidate for the biggest jump of the day, but Petter Solberg wouldn't see the big jumps.
Minus 6 left, minus, tightens 5 over crest, extra long, tightens early over crest, opens 40, cuts 5 left, minus long, keep in the...
He crashed out early on the first Onimpoja stage. 5th place, Dani Sordo admits he still has lots to learn on gravel and was having to draw on all he knows to keep Gigi Gali behind him. He had a cushion of just 1.8 seconds going into the 2nd run through Onimpoja Lansi. Let's follow him through this classic section of the stage.
Derecha 8 corta, 20, rasante derecha 7, salta poco, 20, rasante ya izquierda 5, poco lenta, 5 poco... Vaya hostia.
That put Gali safe in 5th, and with Petter Solberg out of the way, Henning Solberg had moved to 4th. And these 2 Peugeot drivers were providing some of the day's most spectacular action. Up in front, Loeb was still hanging on to Gronholm's coattails, waiting for the Finn to make a mistake, but fate would go against Loeb. A stage 12 rock causing a puncture, and with the Moose failing to activate properly, the Frenchman lost around 30 seconds, and that effectively handed the rally to Gronholm. Gronholm's knowledge of these roads is second to none, and with the pressure off, he set about enjoying himself. Ford's data showed that on one of the day 2 stages he remained in 6th gear for a full 2.5 kilometres, maintaining speeds of over 170 kilometres.
Vasemmalle hae vasen eri jouheen sisältä yli nypyn.
This was to be his 6th Rally Finland win in 7 years.
It was no mistakes, nothing, and the car is perfect, so it was really a good rally for me and team.
And with Mikko Hirvonen coming home in 3rd, this was a good weekend for Ford. Gronholm edged a little closer to Loeb in the drivers' standings, while Hirvonen was making claims for Danny Sordo's 3rd position. And their performances in Finland mean the Ford team are closing on Kronos Citroën in the manufacturer's standings.
The opening ceremony left you in no doubt. This was Rally Japan. Sebastian Loeb has never won here, and with road sweeping an issue, it looked like he would have to give way to Marcus Gronholm. And Gronholm was the early pace setter, winning 5 of the first 6 stages in his Ford Focus. However, rain in the days leading up to the rally had made the stages wet, sticking the surface together and reducing the road sweeping effect. Loeb's road position wasn't such a disadvantage, and he was hanging on to Gronholm, but having to drive to his limit to do that. The wet weather had played havoc with the recce when the crews made their pace notes. And Petter Solberg was struggling with his pace notes.
6 right bus, opens at the crest. 80. 6 right bus up long.
This was compounded by a problem with his brake pads. Chris Atkinson was also having problems. He was carrying a 50-second penalty for being late out of service on day 1, but was still involved in a battle with Danny Sordo for 5th. He went past Sordo on the first stage of day 2 and then set his sights on the 4th place, held by Manfred Stoll. And the Australian was showing that he meant business. That was some recovery.
Chris, the car's a big mess. What happened?
I'm not sure how bad it looks. It's still driving okay, just clipped a few small trees in the outside of a corner, nothing bad.
You've lost the rear wing. It must be difficult to drive without any downforce.
I didn't notice that. I was wondering what was wrong at the end.
But whatever the condition of his car, the Australian was soon in front of Stoll and on his way to his best finish of the season so far. 3rd place Mikko Hirvonen wouldn't be troubled by Atkinson. He was well on his way to another podium finish. On the 2nd day, Loeb had really started to pressurise Gronholm, reducing his lead to just over 6 seconds on stage 13. Gronholm was feeling the heat, and so were his brakes.
The brakes are so hard. Brakes, the brakes. There you go, Marcus Gronholm. As I was saying again,
And on stage 14, Gronholm folded.
Nopea. Oikein miinus kirraa.
And this was followed by another spin on stage 15. He was suddenly nearly 30 seconds behind his French rival. It looked like Loeb was on his way to that record-beating 27th win. But Gronholm had nothing to lose, and on the final day he came out fighting. On stage 22 he took 4.5 seconds out of the Citroën driver and followed that with another 5.5 seconds on stage 24. Loeb was feeling the pinch.
You have to see if he is worried now when he is coming to the finish.
And by the end of stage 25, Loeb's lead was just 8.8 seconds. With the final stage, the short Ober Hero Super Special, if Gronholm was going to snatch the victory, he had to do it on stage 26. And with just Loeb left to complete, Gronholm was the fastest and a massive 30 seconds quicker than the next man, Mikko Hirvonen. Here's Loeb nearing the end of the stage. And that is the time that he's got to beat if he's to stay ahead. The Ford team's reaction tells the story, and so did Loeb and Daniel Ellener's. They were on their way to that 27th win. And there are the statistics that confirm Loeb's record. It wasn't all good news for Citroën though. Danny Sordo excluded for failing to fasten his seatbelt properly after stopping on stage 26. And Sordo's exclusion means that Hirvonen, who finished third in Japan, closes the gap on him in the Drivers' Championship. Loeb extends his lead at the top. Ford continue to close on Citroën in the Manufacturers' Championship.
Following on from Finland and Japan, it was obvious from early on that the Cyprus Rally was going to be about another battle between Sebastian Loeb and Marcus Gronholm. And it was the man from Finland who took the early initiative. Gronholm won 3 of the first 4 stages to take a lead of just under 18 seconds over Loeb. But in the afternoon, Loeb showed that this would remain a two-way battle. Not for the first time, superior tyre choice helped him to get the upper hand. Over the afternoon stages, he reduced Gronholm's lead to just 6.4 seconds. The roads had been graded before the event, which had made the stages smoother and faster than previous years. But Loeb's bumper cam shows there was still plenty of trouble out there, and many were finding problems. Both works Skodas failed to make it to the second stage. Harry Rovanperä and Andreas Aigner suffering the same electrical failure. Petter Solberg had already had a problem with his brakes and an overheating engine before he was reduced to just second gear on stage 7. Henning Solberg went off the road when he was blinded by the sun on stage 8.
How long need it?
Tony Gardemeister had been as high as 3rd, but transmission failure on day 1, followed by a shredded tyre on day 2, dented his aspirations. The Finn would eventually recover to finish 5th on a leaderboard that, due to most cars having some kind of mechanical failure and many having to take advantage of the restart rule, was in a constant state of flux. This may have been the last WRC Cyprus Rally, but it would leave us with the memory that this was one tough event. But Manfred Stoll was one who escaped any major problems. The OMV Peugeot driver advanced to 4th over the first 2 days. And Mikko Hirvonen was again adding to his reputation as the next big thing in the WRC. He too was staying out of trouble and on his way to another podium finish. Hirvonen is good, but he's not quite at the level of Loeb and Gronholm yet. And there was little to separate the two WRC heavyweights on day 2. Over the first 68 kilometers, their combined times differed by just 2.5 seconds. But, like in Japan, it would be Gronholm who would make the decisive mistake.
Oikein hidas. 3 vasen hidas reikä sisällä. Oikein eri jatkuu oikealle 3.
This spin on stage 14 only cost him a few seconds, but that was enough to hand the lead to Loeb.
3 ja vasen hidas.
And once in front, Loeb was ruthless. Like on day 1, he was quicker on the repeated afternoon stages. At the end of the day, his lead was up to an imposing 21.8 seconds. And Gronholm simply had no answers.
He's always a second round runner, driver. He's not so fast on the first run, but when we repeat, he is going fast. So, okay. But nothing to do for the moment.
On the final morning, everybody was anticipating a Gronholm fight back like the one in Japan. But on the first stage, Sebastian Loeb sent out a clear message, beating Gronholm by 7 seconds and extending the lead to nearly 30.
I remember Japan, and I don't want to finish with 5 seconds with a big pressure. So I said, okay, this morning is like yesterday. Fight and no question.
Loeb could then afford to just guide his Citroën through the remaining kilometers to record WRC victory number 28. Gronholm reduced the margin to just over 20 seconds by the end, but Loeb collected another 10 points in the Drivers' Championship. He now needed to just finish 4th in Turkey to retain his title. Mikko Hirvonen's 6 points for 3rd place means he is now just 2 points behind Danny Sordo. After Finland and Japan, Sordo was in need of a confidence-boosting performance in Cyprus, but things went from bad to worse for the young Spaniard. Day 1 saw him retire with an engine problem. He restarted on day 2, but suffered this roll when he overcut a corner on stage 10. And here he is on Sunday's downtown special stage around the streets of Limassol. He was far too fast into that corner. Sordo was left inconsolable. And Sordo's bad run was helping Ford to close the gap on Kronos Citroën in the Manufacturers' Championship. With 4 events left, they are now just 7 points behind.
Sebastian Loeb had expected to be crowned world champion at the Rally of Turkey. But sensationally, he would not be at the start line. Instead, he was at home in Geneva nursing a broken arm he suffered in a mountain biking accident.
This is a bike who caused me all this trouble. I was just 3 kilometers from here in the forest, and in a downhill I just go past over my bike and fall directly on my arm on a big stone. So when something happens, immediately I think to the championship, to the rally, and okay, so I came home. I knew that something is wrong with my arm, but I didn't know exactly what. So I went to the hospital, and then was a bad surprise to know that it's broken and that it will take some time and that I will miss for sure Turkey.
His replacement in the Citroën team was WRC legend Colin McRae. He may have expected to be the headline act, but on day 1 at least, he was upstaged by the weather. Torrential rain had turned the roads to deep mud and led to the cancellation of 3 of the opening day's stages, amid fears that medical vehicles wouldn't be able to get into the stage in the event of an accident. But on the stages that were run, Marcus Grönholm gave notice that he was going to take maximum advantage of the fact that Sebastian Loeb wasn't here. The Finn looked as assured as anybody possibly could in such conditions to open up a lead approaching 30 seconds. While Colin McRae had a satisfactory first day, running 6th, if you were looking for a comeback story, Petter Solberg was providing that. Although his Subaru was experiencing some traction problems, it seemed to be largely free of the debilitating mechanical issues that had scuppered his assault on the driver's title. He established himself in 2nd. Solberg's speed on the later part of day 1 even suggested he might be capable of mounting a challenge for first place. But while showing promising signs, there is still some work to be done on the Subaru, and Solberg would have to accept he wasn't quite ready to compete with the likes of Grönholm. 2nd place for the Norwegian would have still been a great result, but regardless of the talent of the driver or soundness of the car, nothing can be taken for granted in Turkey. On day 2, a big rock threw the Subaru offline, and Solberg and co-driver Phil Mills were stuck in a ditch. More disappointment for Solberg, but he could still take some positives from this event. And Colin McRae was being reminded of how tough it is at the top. He may have 25 WRC wins under his belt, but he was still getting used to this car and the setup of the team. Tyre choice was always an issue, and some wrong decisions in this department were holding him back. But he and co-driver Nicky Grist still looked set for a top 8 finish. However, although they were in Loeb and Eleanor's car, they didn't experience the luck of the reigning world champions. A failed alternator forcing them to retire on the very last stage. Despite the awful conditions, there were relatively few retirements, though Jan Kopecky would not be coming back from this off. This made for some intense competition throughout the classification, and many crews would be celebrating come the end of the rally. Kosti Katimäki, Chevy Pons and Chris Atkinson were disputing the middle order of the leaderboard over the last 2 days. By the time they reached the last stage, 4th place was the prize, and it was Chris Atkinson who was in possession. But Pons put in a fantastic run to leapfrog both Atkinson and Katimäki to take 4th. A sweet moment for the Spaniard, who's experienced a poor run of results since being replaced as the nominated manufacturer scorer in the Kronos Citroën team by Danny Sordo. And with Katimäki also getting the better of Atkinson to finish 5th, he and the Stobart VK Ford team could celebrate their best result to date. Petter Solberg's retirement saw Mikko Hirvonen inherit 2nd, which would equal his best ever finish. He held off a spirited challenge from Henning Solberg. But the Peugeot man would end up celebrating a first ever podium finish. Brake failure meant it was a nervous run through the final stage. But at last, he could enjoy his moment.
No brakes at all.
Here we go, the biggest smile in Turkey.
Yes! we broke a brake pipe, so we have to fix it, so we nearly reached the end and now we are on the podium for the first time. Oh, I was nervous. Oh.
But the biggest party would be in the Ford camp. With Hirvonen already across the finish line, it was just left for Grönholm to get home to give the team their first 1-2 since Mexico 2004. Team boss Malcolm Wilson literally jumping for joy. This also meant that with the uncertainty over when Loeb would return, Grönholm had maintained his chance of lifting the driver's title. But he still had a mountain to climb if he was to achieve that. The gap was still 25 points. Mikko Hirvonen moved into 3rd ahead of Danny Sordo. And to neatly round off a great weekend for Ford, they also took over leadership in the Manufacturers' Championship.
At As expected, Sebastian Loeb was still absent as the WRC made the journey to the other side of the world for Rally Australia. So Marcus Gronholm set out on the opening leg knowing that he needed a win or at very least a podium to keep his championship hopes alive.
7. Vasen hidas. Ja vasen eri sisältä. 5 ja vasen eri, älä. Oikein nopea sumppuu kivi sisällä 7. Vasen hidas kirraa.
But just a few kilometres into the first proper stage, it looked to be all over. The 11 minutes this off cost him looked to have handed Loeb the driver's title.
Has this handed the championship to Sebastian Loeb, or can you fight back and get near the podium? You need third, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, but I think he deserves it because he was leading so comfortable. So, okay, now, okay, stupid mistake from me.
Gronholm's demotion left the Subarus of Petter Solberg and Chris Atkinson out in front, and it was the Australian who was the leader in front of his home crowd. But Atkinson's dream of delivering a home victory in what was the last time this event was to be held in Western Australia would last only a few stages. He went off and his Subaru caught fire.
Just sit here, take your helmet off. Leave it on. Don't get too close to him if it ignites.
And the news got no better for Subaru, as it was not Petter Solberg who inherited the lead, but Ford's Mikko Hirvonen, who was now leading his team's challenge to enhance their position at the top of the standings in the Manufacturers' Championship. But Solberg was still enjoying a revival in fortunes.
Right into 6 left bus long, keep Bevy in the crest, slow 40, 6 right long, Titans 5 left, Titans keep in the crest.
And not even this overshoot on stage 8 could stop him retaking the lead.
Go right.
But if he could overcome overshoots, he couldn't overcome the hanging dust, which had become a constant problem. On the following stage, the problem was so bad the Norwegian had to stop, which handed his Finnish rival an advantage in the region of 30 seconds. Petter's brother Henning was also in trouble, but his problem was far more terminal.
150.
But Henning's retirement was one of relatively few for this event, which made for some fascinating battles throughout the field. With Danny Sordo suffering mechanical problems on day 1, Terry Pons was left on his own in Kronos Citroen's bid to catch Ford in the Manufacturers' Championship, and he was fighting it out with Manfred Stoll for 3rd place. There was little to separate them, and after stage 14 on the second day, they were dead level. But Stoll has more experience in Australia, and with Ponce needing to protect his 4th place from Gronholm, who was moving back up the leaderboard, Stoll gradually took the upper hand in this contest to take his 2nd consecutive 3rd place. Up ahead, Petter Solberg was on course to deliver his first podium since Argentina, the most positive sign yet that Subaru were beginning to get to the bottom of their technical issues.
40.
Okay, congratulations, Phil.
But the season was just getting better and better for Mikko Hirvonen, who was finally about to deliver his first WRC win.
Mikko, listen to this. 2006 Rally Australia winner.
Sounds really, really good, and it's been a fantastic weekend. Just having this fight with Petter and doing the same speed as him, so fantastic. Can't really believe it.
There's the result, and with Marcus Gronholm only finishing 5th, the celebrations could start in the Citroën camp. Sebastian Loeb, the World Drivers' Champion for a 3rd time, even though he was sitting at home in Geneva, although he was able to join in the festivities via an internet link. And there it is with a 21-point lead and just 2 events left. Loeb could not be caught by Gronholm. Hirvonen's win helped Ford to move further ahead of Kronos Citroën in the Manufacturers' Championship. Their lead now 16 points.
Rally New Zealand had moved to new headquarters in Hamilton for 2006, with a number of stages that would be new to these drivers, and that was one of the reasons that newly crowned World Drivers' Champion Sebastian Loeb was in attendance for the recce.
Congratulations, Sebastian, 2006 World Rally Champion. You must be very pleased to have done it for the 3rd time.
Yes, sure. It was a nice feeling to be champion during Australia, because it was a big pressure. Since I broke my arm, I couldn't do anything against Marcus, and he was closing the gap, so now that's done.
So Loeb was drivers' champion, but without him it was going to be a big ask for his Kronos Citroën team to win the Manufacturers' Championship. Ford needed to score just 3 points more than their rivals to secure what would be their first title since 1979, the days of the mighty Escort. And the Ford duo of Gronholm and Hirvonen were quickest out of the blocks, rapidly opening an advantage of more than 30 seconds over the rest of the field. Mikko Hirvonen may have been on a high after his win in Australia, but he would have to adjust to being behind his senior teammate Marcus Gronholm in New Zealand. Gronholm had won in New Zealand on 3 previous occasions and was looking to make this his 6th win of the season. But the Citroëns of Danny Sordo and Chevy Pons were doing everything in their power to keep the hopes of their team alive. Both established themselves in the top 5, but still it looked like they would need to rely on the retirement of one of the Fords to maintain an interest in the manufacturers' standings. And this pairing had more immediate concerns as they were fighting it out with Manfred Stoll over 3rd position. Sordo had taken 3rd place away from the Austrian at the end of day 1 and increased his advantage when he went for a soft compound tyre in the damp conditions of the 2nd morning. For once, things seemed to be going the right way for the Spaniard on the gravel. Stoll, who had gone for a hard compound tyre, also lost time to Pons, but he learned from his mistakes, and in the afternoon, with his setup spot on, he beat both Citroëns on the 2 main tests to regain 3rd position. After promising signs in Australia, Subaru were again struggling to keep pace with the leaders. Peter Solberg had complained of having no grip on the opening day and would get no higher than 6th. While Chris Atkinson would not return after colliding with a rock and wrecking his suspension on stage 9.
Okay, stand by a moment.
For the 2nd event in a row, it would be Henning Solberg who would take the prize for the biggest off when he rolled on day 2. The Norwegian would recover to finish 12th, which was 1 place behind Valentino Rossi. The multiple MotoGP champion was sampling the WRC for only the 2nd time. He started cautiously and had some difficulty with the conditions. But he showed a steady progression in his times and was really enjoying these stages. Is a permanent switch to the WRC a possibility for one of the biggest names in motorsport? In the carve-up for the major positions, come the last day, Manfred Stoll was drawing on his greater New Zealand experience to consolidate himself in third position. Meanwhile, Chevy Pons put in some great times, including being fastest on the last two stages to take Danny Sordo for fourth position. Creditable performances by the Citroën duo, but they would not be good enough to prevent the Ford 1-2. Mikko Hirvonen was second, his sixth consecutive podium. While Marcus Gronholm was registering his fourth win in New Zealand and his 24th WRC victory, which put him level with Tommi Mäkinen as the Finn with the most career wins.
Slow, 50. Long left, slow, into the finish.
There's confirmation of the result, but the most important statistic was that after 27 years, Ford were manufacturers' champions again. And after a lifetime with Ford as a driver and now team principal, this was a dream come true for Malcolm Wilson.
I've got to be honest, I'm speechless. I think it's a full credit to all the team. They've done it's taken us 10 years since we took on the Ford contract to get to this position. But really, at the end of the day, it's all about people, and what the people have done back at M Sport up in Cumbria, I think, is it's fantastic. And we've been bridesmaid on many occasions, but to actually do it now is just a great feeling.
And there are the standings. Ford take an unbeatable 25-point lead into the final event. In the Drivers' Championship, Mikko Hirvonen is now confirmed in third. The only issue left to decide now is who finishes fourth.
With Wales Rally GB back in its traditional end-of-season slot, the crews were faced with the worst of the British weather. Overnight rain ensured that the stages were especially slippery on the morning of day one. That didn't seem to bother Marcus Gronholm, who won this event in 2001. He led from the very first stage. And his teammate Mikko Hirvonen, as in New Zealand, was second. Although Hirvonen's Focus did receive some damage when he slid wide and hit a rock on stage one. After the first loop of stages, Gronholm and Hirvonen look set to try and repeat New Zealand's 1-2 for Ford. But at service there was bad news for Mikko. He was forced to retire. Though the damage to his Focus he'd received from that rock looked repairable, there was a critical problem under that crumpled metal. The roll cage had been damaged, and the safety implications meant the car could not continue.
You know, it's really a shame. I would have loved to finish the rally, and even though what happened in the first stage, I really enjoyed it. So all the three stages. So a shame that it ended like this. We would have a good, maybe want to finish in the rally and end the season like that, but you know, it didn't happen.
The conditions meant that staying on the road was a victory in itself, and many failed to achieve this. Henning Solberg has had a lively time in the last few events, and Wales was no different, although he recovered from this off to finish 11th. But Andreas Eigner would not return from this role.
Wird 4 plus kurz, slip innen, in leicht links, zip.
With Hirvonen out, Petter Solberg inherited second place and spent the next day and a half jostling for position with Manfred Stoll. In a ding-dong battle for preeminence, nerves eventually told, with Solberg hitting a post on stage 11.
One right, tightens up long, opens, 100, no!
He broke the impetuous steering rack and dropped to third. No wins in 2006 for the Norwegian. He'll be hoping for better fortunes in 2007. So Manfred Stoll took second, a strong end to the season for the Austrian after finishing third in Australia and New Zealand. That also equals his best ever result in the WRC, a fitting way to celebrate his and co-driver Ilka Miner's 50th start together.
40, rechts frei, minus Abzweig, ziehen.
Behind Stoll and Solberg was another battle being fought between Chevy Ponce and Jari-Matti Latvala. The Finn driving a Stobart VK Ford was the man on top, holding fourth place at the end of leg one. But Ponce nibbled away at his rival on day two and took back fourth position. That wasn't the end of it though. Latvala fought back on the final day, retaking fourth, a career best for him and a best finish too for Stobart VK Ford. Ponce's teammate Danny Sordo had looked a possibility for a podium finish early on, but gearbox failure on day two ended his hopes. He eventually finished 7th, a downbeat farewell to the Zara then for Danny, who'll be driving a C4 next year when Citroën returns as a full manufacturer's team. The team hitting the headlines in Wales though was Ford, with Grönholm giving the team their first win at their home event since 1979. Having won the Manufacturers' Championship this year, Ford and Grönholm will be aiming for the double in 2007.
Pitkä hidas, kivet sisällä.
And it was Grönholm's 25th WRC victory, the most by any Finnish driver.
Marcus first overall. That's 7 wins this season, 25th career, and first time Ford won here in 27 years.
Lot of statistics now. Yeah, it's good. It's good feeling after all. Yeah, very good for my first year with Ford and so, and to finish 1 point behind Sebi. It's a little bit, you know. Otherwise, it would have been fantastic.
So Marcus Grönholm picks up the final 10 points of the season, Manfred Stoll second and Petter Solberg third. Sebastian Loeb is the drivers' champion for the 3rd year running. His enforced layoff meaning the winning margin over Grönholm just 1 point. Mikko Hirvonen finishes 3rd, while Manfred Stoll's 2nd place saw him leapfrog Danny Sordo to finish 4th. Ford in the end comfortable winners of the Manufacturers' Championship from Kronos Citroën. Subaru finished 3rd, OMV Peugeot 4th, Stobart VK Ford 5th and Red Bull Skoda 6th.